What is real?
It's all in his mind.
How do you define real?
Purely psychosomatic. That boy needs therapy.
Beethoven had his critics too.
This is your life.
I'm all loving every minute of it.
But it still hurts.
Stop trying to control everything and just let go.
I don't like the idea that I'm not in control of my life.
You know, we're living in a society.
That boy needs therapy.
We all do.
You know what divine intervention is?
It's your kids, Marty.
What's really going to bake your noodle later on is...
They didn't stop to think they should.
What just happened here was a miracle.
We all wear masks, metaphorically speaking.
So what are you gonna do about it?
You gotta grow up.
But how?
You have to let it all go to free your mind.
I'm scared.
That's a problem for future Homer. Man, I don't envy that guy.
Hi all, Nick here, welcome back. This is episode 3 of Confessions of an Itchoholic. Cultural forces, seeking wisdom but not finding it, and cultural allergies. These are the things that this episode is about. One of these forces is ads, 90s ads. I have ads stuck in my head, never to be removed. So,
Thank you very much.
For that, free to air commercial television channels of the 90s. Hang in for the end of this ep where I find a way to break out of these cultural shackles in a less than socially acceptable way. Episode 3. Allergies. Music quote. With the lights out, it's less dangerous. Here we are now. Entertain us. I feel stupid and contagious. Here we are now. Entertain us. A denial, a denial, a denial, a denial, a denial. Okay, you get the idea. End quote. Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana, 1991, sung by Kurt Cobain. 1. Growing up. It was around this time, a year or two after we moved to Queensland, that I began waking up from my initial childlike state, a sort of phase shift of development, as I grew and began to attempt to understand more of the world around me as I moved into early teenagerhood. As hard as they were, the preteen wonder years were ending. I was spending much less time playing with my sister. She was a full teenager by now, immersed in mid-90s teen culture. Gone were the Kylie Mole stickers,
So I just punched her.
Comedy Company cassettes and Cabbage Patch dolls, replaced with hypercolour t-shirts, denim jackets and CDs like Jagged Little Pill to listen to whilst reading Girlfriend magazine, surrounded by pin-up posters of Stephen Dorff and Dieter Brummer. If she wasn't polishing her Doc Martens whilst watching Blossom on TV, she was recording B105's Top 20 Countdown
B105 Top 20
onto cassette so she could play chart toppers at sleepovers with her girlfriends. Little of this made sense to me. We were going our separate paths through the maze of adolescence after so much lovingly bonded brother-sisterhood time. I was changing too. Physically, my battle with my skin raged. My primary weapon to counter this was to wear t-shirts that were 4 or 5 sizes too large for my puny shoulders and chest, hiding as much skin real estate as I could, drowning my unsightly limbs in cotton. Mentally, a lot was going on. I began to experience a mini maturation/metamorphosis that shaped my experience of my early teens in 2 primary ways. The first was a realization that was not explicit to me at the time and remained hidden underneath, deep in my subconscious. And here it is. I felt like I was useless. There was a story in my head that I could never get anything right, that I was low on ability, and that my family were not proud of me, embarrassed by me even, that I was in many ways a shameful creature. Maybe this was normal adolescent stuff. Chris Cornell, the lead singer of Soundgarden and Audioslave, once said, quote, I remember having more fun when I was 9 because I hadn't started becoming depressed yet. At 11, you wake up one day and start feeling bad about everything, end quote. The second set of sensations I started feeling were explicit. I did feel them. I did notice them and did so for the rest of my confusing adolescence. Here they are. There seemed to be something a bit wrong with the world, or at least the part of the world that I was experiencing, like my culture. There were things I wasn't being told about life, things that were not explained to me, questions I had that I felt I couldn't ask. So this second part made me feel a bit off and confused. I began noticing it by listening to the things people were saying and then seeing with my own eyes and feeling with my own senses that what they were saying couldn't be true. I felt in some ways detached from the very culture that was shaping me. I felt that I didn't fit anywhere, including and especially inside my own family oftentimes, but also out in the world and in society at large. The biggest part of this realization was this: people didn't seem to know what they were talking about, even as they acted as if they did. It felt like most things were fake. People seemed to be play acting at how to be human.
What is real?
For 12-year-old me, this was a disconcerting turn of events. What was happening? Was I intuiting that people often existed somehow closed off from themselves and their own authenticity, despite not knowing exactly what that meant? Or was I just a normal kid hitting up against the vastness of what I didn't yet understand about people and society? In her book Untamed, the author Glennon Doyle speaks of our cultural taming, inverted commas, as we grow and learn about the world as a sort of set of rules about how we should act. Quote, 10 is when children begin to hide who they are in order to become what the world expects them to be. Right around 10 is when we begin to internalize our formal taming. 10 is when the world sat me down, told me to be quiet, and pointed towards my cages. End quote. So each human is a unique product of their specific nurture environment. The human brain, that blob in your head that's the most complex structure in the known universe, is a master in adaptability. It's humankind's primary evolutionary advantage. Some animals are fast, some are good at hiding.
I see you.
Some have incredible defense mechanisms. Humans can adapt to their specific environment like no other animal, and this has served us well considering we have spread all over the world into every environmental niche imaginable, but also because our environments are fluctuating so quickly with the rapid pace of technology and cultural change. So it stands to reason that each one of us is incredibly specifically adapted, soft-wired if you will, to the completely unique environment we were raised in. Thank you for indulging in my amateur anthropological rant. So my brain was no different. It was a malleable and pliable grey mass of electricity that was being wired up and shaped by the full gamut of human forces. Familial and social rituals and norms, interacting with hierarchical structures like education and health systems, interacting with popular culture like TV and movies and music, but also advertising and brands, interacting with the capitalist system and work and money, the bedrock of our Western civilization. Plus other socio-cultural forces like masculinity, primary and secondary relationships, and eventually mate selection. Then there was my health. Everything in my physical life was allergens and symptoms and allergic reactions, and take this medicine and avoid this trigger, and the ever-exhausting merry-go-round of a chronic reactive body. My mind was starting to think in this way about the things I experienced outside my body, to overlay this language onto the culture I was experiencing. These newly emerging feelings that arose from my sense of dislocation and confusion about how to be felt like cultural allergies. 2. Cultural allergies. What were these cultural forces I was beginning to feel allergic to? It's only in retrospect that I can list them all here. They were not all fully explicit to me at the time, but they were forming in my mind, coalescing ideas like iron filings attracted to a magnet, fanning out into shapes and a narrative that made little sense to me then, yet would repel me with a force that was not possible to ignore, much like a physical allergen. So they included inauthenticity. Simple, dismissive solutions to complex problems. Quote, do as I say, not as I do, end quote, which is an offshoot of inauthenticity. Small talk, which is another offshoot of inauthenticity. Advertising and selling yourself, another offshoot of inauthenticity. Fundamental thinking or certainty, lack of nuance, inability to say, I don't know. Toughness as a masculine trait. Being told not to react a certain way, or being told to only react a certain way. Formality of any type, religious, cultural rituals, including seasonal events like Christmas and Easter, school formalities, familial formalities. I honestly didn't understand any of them.
They didn't stop to think if they should.
So put most simply, the presence of these things caused in me some sort of felt negative and allergic reaction. Now, further to the feelings of those things, there was a feeling of the absence of things, a vacuum of values. So these included vulnerability, honesty, moral doubt, emotional intelligence, understanding of pain and suffering. That's a lot of dings. One more. and a discussion about one of the immutable laws of human existence, mortality. So these feelings were pretty confusing. I had my physical life, the hurt and frustration of my explosively reactive body, and my social need to hide and fly under the social radar. And now I had my cultural anchors being ripped up by sensations that I was living in some sort of simulation that was coded wrong.
This isn't real.
Or perhaps I was coded wrong. It's notable that I didn't choose these virtues. They were sort of built into me somehow. I don't understand that. I wasn't some wise sage purposefully conjuring the most sought after human qualities. These needs, as represented by the cultural allergies, were residing inside me prior to me being conscious of what my life was about. And much like the maternity ward newborns whose essence defies descriptive words, these feelings were not intelligible to me at the time. I couldn't articulate them. I couldn't intellectualize them. I couldn't understand them. I felt them. They existed in my body and in my mind as some sort of physiological response to what I was experiencing. It was like my soul was leaking through the rational cage my mind firmly erected around me to try to comprehend the world. Looking out at the people around me, they seemed to have little room for doubt. This is how you should live. In this paradigm, there was almost no room for discomfort or for pain or suffering, the very purveyors of doubt and uncertainty.
Oh.
Or for questions of meaning. Pain, suffering, emotional and physical weakness was to be hidden from others because it wasn't sure. It wasn't strong enough to know the answers. It promoted the intolerability of inaction, when all we often want as humans is to know what to do, to take some action, take our future into our hands and make a fucking decision that helps us move forward. It was idealized to keep calm and carry on, in brackets, whilst ignoring the truth of how you feel, in brackets. I couldn't understand how people would defend the way they blindly acted without ever questioning their own impulses. I constantly felt like I had no idea how to act, was steeped in moral doubt, but when asked or told to act a certain way, I felt disconnected and like simply following orders was demeaning, controlling, or oppressive. There's a cognitive bias called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people overestimate their competence in any given area of social or intellectual understanding relative to other people. Put another way, the more you know about a specific topic or thing, the less you think you know, or the less certain you are about mastering that thing, because you can see more fully its complexity. So basically, there's an inverse correlation between expertise and certainty of understanding. The opposite of this is the less you know, the more certain you can be. Mental alarms should go off inside the mind of anyone surrounded by people absolutely convinced they know everything about things. Wrapping my rational, understanding brain around these wordless sensations, these emergent values that were presenting as feelings, I grappled with the certainty that was presented to me and the schism created by the uncertainty I felt. 3. Wisdom. It was around this time that my dad and I found ourselves operating at different frequencies. Not least of all because of my growing sense of teenage disaffection. I was beginning to bristle at his authority as I attempted to develop my own sense of who I was in separation from him and authority in general. This is a rite of passage gauntlet that all teenage boys must walk in their relationships with their fathers or father figures, and it wasn't easy. I recall these words firmly and frequently said to me, and my corresponding mental meta-response to them that was never spoken. Stand up straight. I can't. My shoulders were slumped from birth and I have no back muscles because I'm clearly the runt of the litter. Get out of bed. I can't. I haven't slept properly and my body is racked with inflammation. Look people in the eyes when you talk to them. I can't. Their raw humanness shines through those soul windows. I'm too scared by my own humanity to face anyone else's. Stop scratching and pecking at your skin. I fucking can't. Don't be so cheeky. Sorry, I must be cheeky. This is not a choice. It's a reaction as natural as breathing. Very important tangent. Yes, that is the boom from the Australian version of Family Feud, which ran on Channel 7 from 1990 to 1996. Okay, where were we? We were talking about kids being cheeky. Exposing hypocrisy with humour, sarcasm, cynicism was the one thing I could cling to that made sense. Cheekiness appears to be a built-in trait that emerges in children to subvert seriousness and rules and to push boundaries. I've seen it in my own rapscallion kids from the age of like 18 months. They learn the social rules and then they quickly learn how to break them so they can swiftly take the piss and point out how useless you are at parenting.
Are you little?
Back to me in the 90s. Part of all this is realizing for the first time your parents, or any figure of authority, are fallible beings and not the gods you thought they were. A normal phase of growing up. It wasn't as if my parents were wrong to be expressing these things to me. They were imparting their wisdom about how to be in the world the best way they knew how. But the disconnect with what I was seeing, hearing, experiencing, and what I was feeling inside, my inability to articulate those internal states. Remember alexithymia from episode 1? But my reactions to their necessary authority is the point here. A cavernous gap was widening between how I was expected to act and how I felt about how to act. So the impulse to get your children to act a certain way is very, very strong. I have felt it when parenting my own children. The idea is not only that there is a correct way that they should be acting, but that A, they should quite magically know what that is, and B, they should choose to act that way in the pursuit of living a life that matches with their parents' values. If they choose not to, then they are being something less than the ideal version of themselves in the parents' eyes. Lazy or selfish or inconsiderate, rude, a disappointment, whatever. So this parenting instinct is understandable because we want to pass to children values that we hold dear. Because as parents, we are operating from the axiom that those values are worth having. We need to protect our children, raise them right. And one way we do this is by trying to get them to act the way that we want. Because as parents, we know the best way to act. Assumedly. But not always? Probably infrequently. Rarely? Do we know the best way to act? 4. Fear. Children require their parents' fear enacted as protective, often controlling behaviour to keep them from hurting themselves and sometimes dying.
But you're not scared of anything.
I was today. I thought I might lose you.
This is terrifying as a parent, especially a new parent. Oh my God, I have to keep this crazy entity alive. They are irrational, highly emotive, volatile, and often act insanely. It turns out they are this way by design. They need to gradually expose themselves to the ways of the complex world by taking risks and exploring the boundaries of themselves and the physical and social world, normally through challenge, hardship, or pain even, by taking risky actions with guidance from elders to avoid catastrophe. Hopefully, in order to map what the world is and create a simpler model of its complexity in their brains in order to navigate it. Children seem to absorb from their parents ways to act more from copying the ways they see their parents act than what their parents say to them or shout at them about how to act. So this is called modelling. I'm convinced that my own boys only absorb, interpret and enact upon approximately 4% of the words that I actually say to them.
Not listening.
Yet they are obviously digesting the behaviours they see me enacting mimetically in ways that I am yet to fully comprehend. The protective instinct in fathers especially can easily turn into a need to control children.
I've got to teach my son a lesson.
Out of a realistic fear that something bad will happen.
You could have been killed.
But this can sometimes turn into tyranny.
You deliberately disobeyed me.
How much should we curtail our children's actions to cater for our fears of risk mitigation or our desire that they act normally or appropriately in any given situation? And how often should we let them be? Sit back and watch without judgment, however they act, and accept the consequences? When do we demand a change in behaviour? And when do we accept that behaviour is emergent and always speaks to profounder rumblings and happenings down in the depths of their developing psyches? When are we making our kids fearful instead of helping them face their fears? As peace activist Thich Nhat Hanh puts it, quote, fear brings about that which one is afraid of, end quote. Exactly how much fear, risk management and control is required to keep a child safe, but still satisfy the requirement to expose them to enough hardship so they learn to survive without the parents' help and without the parents' fears. This is, after all, what we are doing as parents, building people who can eventually care for themselves. Okay, that was a lot of questions, and this is a one-way medium, so I can't hear your responses. I don't have the answers to all these questions as a parent in these here 2020s. But at the time, in the early 90s, all of this was overwhelming me as I found myself being told how to be by everyone and everything around me. The requirement to act a certain way was creating an oppressive, confusing feeling that made me feel that anyone who was expecting me to live like this without any ability to explain explicitly why this was the only way was deluded
It's all in his mind.
and creating a false sense of reality.
That boy needs therapy.
Okay, all that was a little bit heavy, so this is something a bit more fun. Music quote. One time a thing occurred to me. What's real and what's for sale? Flies in the Vaseline we are. Sometimes it blows my mind. Keep getting stuck here all the time. End quote. Stone Temple Pilots, Vaseline, released in 1994, sung by Scott Weiland. 5. The Allergy of Advertising. More cultural allergies began to emerge. I simply despised, with everything in my entire oversensitive nervous system, advertising and marketing. Almost all of the advertising I absorbed was through the same medium that everyone else who grew up in the 80s and 90s was exposed to it. Television. Ah, sweet television. Okay, enough of that. You get the idea. A lot of this advertising was about perfect skin. Quote, because you're worth it. End quote.
Because you're worth it.
Sleek, supple, sensual skin.
So creamy.
Often with graphics overlaid to prove its sleek and supple and sensualness.
With revitalizing avocado and all-day hydration.
The skin floating on the screen in our living room, clinging firmly to the supermodel's skinny frames, was flawless.
Instantly smoother.
Blemish-free, achingly beautiful.
Instant firming.
And perfectly unattainable.
Beautiful.
Just imagine what your life would be like, Nick, if you had perfect skin like us. The models would flirtingly coo at me. Obviously that's not really how models sound. Sorry about that. Offering up their overpriced potions with patented molecules and natural extracts and purifying and hydrating, exfoliating antioxidants. And other confusing shit like this.
Fructis from Laboratoire Garnier.
And I did imagine every single day. I compared their perfection to my disaster, and those comparisons lodged deep into my subconscious. Of course, there was more to advertising than the teasing of impossible skin. So much more. Cadbury used fluorescent windsurfers to convince me to change the colour of my day. Which meant have a more exciting life than you currently have. And somehow this was correlated with buying and consuming honeycomb crunchy chocolate bars. Many ads weren't even aspirational, just repetitive. I recall that Lubemobile's number was 133032, as sung by a toothless, mullet-haired kid in a catchy jingle.
That's 133032.
I remember the McDonald's ad where a man walks to the counter, then in one breath orders the entire menu.
Hi, may I take your order, please?
I'll have a Big Mac, quarter pounder, fillet of fish McFeast as well.
Okay, I'm not going to play the whole thing. This man went on Hey Hey It's Saturday to perform the same feat in front of a live audience. And of course, my family and I were watching in our lounge room when he did. It then follows that my sister and I had to learn how to say this entire monologue perfectly. It was conveniently printed on the sides of the takeaway bags that year. Very concerningly, I can still recite it to this day. And no, I'm not going to do it, and you can't make me. What valuable knowledge, I often wonder, has been kept from my brain over the years for this advertising campaign to remain firmly wedged in there. The valuable things that have been lost cannot be listed, only the worthless things that remain.
Thank you, Mr. Hooker.
Sick of Rex.
Problem with my Go-Go-Mobile.
I feel like chicken tonight.
This man is a dentist, so we can't show you his face on television.
Why the fuck not?
You just can't top the copper top. Maybe she's born with it.
Light on the fizz so you can slam it down fast.
God, there were just so many. If only I had more energy to keep clipping them. Woo! Oh, that's better.
You know, you used to look great in a mini.
Did I?
Just like a chocolate milkshake, only crunchy.
Maybe it's Maybelline.
Plus, my favourite.
Love the skin you're in.
Yeah, thanks for that. Fortunately, and thanks to my literal rather than metaphorical allergies, I never got to
Nibble Nobby's nuts.
I've heard these words intoned and spoken and sung to me more times than I've heard almost anything else in my life, repetitively drilled into my grey matter, corrupting, confusing, coercing, proclaiming scarcity and promoting insufficiency. Advertisements aim to take away the uncertainty of your life by offering you a solution. And it was this certainty that triggered me. Imagine the hyper-novel environment of a small boy whose ancient ancestors lived in caves and marveled at imagined and mythical creatures in the night sky, with a cathode ray tube pointed straight at his vulnerable preteen brain, soaking up the perfect skinned messaging of multinational corporations. The fundamental guiding philosophy of advertising is to make people feel inadequate and then provide the solution to that feeling, thereby influencing their decisions. Philosopher Rene Girard called this, quote, mimetic desire, end quote, which stokes our need to imitate people who we see modelling value to us, which is what advertising does.
Short skirts are back.
Are they?
Many of the choices that we make as people are a battle between our immediate reward systems and success and contentedness and survival over a longer time frame, which is basically delayed gratification again. We know that marketing exploits these poorly organised reward circuits to extract our value as agents inside the capitalist system as consumers.
You're worth it.
Okay, one more little rant and then I'll get to the point. It is possible that the perfect consumer, the very agent the world's mega corporations were trying to create back in the 90s to sell their wares to, is not actually a very good human, capable of making very good decisions. Because this would be someone who is impulsive, has a lot of needs they require to be satisfied, and limited wisdom at hand to satisfy them. Is salient to being hijacked by information, that is, they believe easily what is presented to them. Doesn't or can't weigh up the pros and cons of their decisions. Is looking for modelling of how to live because of a dearth of such modelling in real life. Has binary thinking, that is, I have a problem and I need a quick solution. Now, I'm not saying people who consume don't know how to live. I'm saying that the ideal version of a consumer to advertisers would be someone with little self-agency, who is superficial in their appraisal of value and can be easily manipulated. The outcome of which would be the corporations' very communication techniques push people further away from themselves, further from good sense-making, and they disrupt their choice-making in negative ways by design. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. Okay, I explain all of this because I ended up becoming exactly the person that I have described, a perfectly addicted and compulsive consumer. The most valuable consumer imaginable. My insecurity was firmly correlated with the need to buy stuff, like a hamster trapped on a hedonistic treadmill, unable to self-regulate. Even though I felt assaulted by ads and jingles and slogans and logos,
G-O-G-G-O,
I couldn't get away from them. I was created in part by the forces of these systems to interact with them exactly the way they wanted. And it worked. Yet, there was a subconscious part of me that intuitively knew I needed to minimize my exposure to these forces to protect my vulnerability. My minimization techniques, limited mostly to muting ads whenever possible, failed miserably because the most reliable way of making people believe in falsehoods is with repetition.
Hit me slowly.
Hit me quick.
Hit me.
Hit me.
By the way, I think your cup's full.
6. Sugar. It stands to reason then that my first true deep love would be sugar. I regularly changed the colour of my day and my teeth by munching down on lollies and chocolates and whatever I could get my hands on. Oh, the sweet caress of Lady Sucrose, how she teased and delighted me and how she eventually corrupted and hijacked me. The Milky Bars were literally on me.
It's the Milky Bar Kid.
I could not get enough. If the entirety of the chocolate bars and lolly packets that I consumed during my youth was shown in one place, it would be like one of those giant warehouses where they store raw sugar in mountains, and you could climb the pile, then slide down the other side like a sandhill. Chocolate buttons from the tuck shop at school, boysenberry billabong ice creams from the fish and chip shop after tennis practice, lime cordial for afternoon tea,
To an icy cold glass of Cotty's Crush Cordial.
with a high ratio of cordial to water. I needed that hit, that high of sugar coursing through my veins. And I was not able to delay that gratification at all. Sometimes a mere 30 minutes before dinner was called, I would jump on my bike and rush to the newsagent down the road to secretly scoff a Buffalo Bill or a Milky Way. The solution to my ills, ills, that vacant, disconnected feeling of deficiency, was presented to me virtually on the screen in our living rooms. And the bulk of it was in the form of sugar. Sucrose-drenched cereals that were Iron Man food. And the aspiration of athletic-looking people enjoying a Mars a day, which helped them work, rest and play, apparently. This particular ad for Mars was brought to you by
Steve Monaghetti.
You're fucking kidding me. Playgrounds full of perky, colourfully dressed kids that had got to be made of Milo.
You can do it.
While sharing Skittles so they could taste the rainbow. Oh, what a wonderful world it was.
And look, a chocolate plane.
Where cartoon animals played with each other and dived into unnaturally coloured cereal and beckoned me to join them like happy little Vegemites. It's worth mentioning here that there are now, admittedly weak, regulations on advertising sugary foods and junk during children's programming. But we're talking about the 90s, man. It was a free-for-all. Back in the real world, I was helpless to defer that craving. The lure of the bliss point, the relief as my hijacked dopaminergic system constantly caved to my growing addiction. This reward circuit system, refined over millennia to give positive biological feedback when we gain access to something of value, was now existing in a hyper-novel environment where sugar was plentiful and the only thing preventing my access to it, as opposed to scarcity, was my willpower. This is not an adequate prevention mechanism, because if it feels good, do it again, and again, and again. Advertising was to my mind what the itch was to my body, an irresistible pain point, needling away, reducing agency, tempting a response, and forcing the attainment of immediate gratification. Sugar was the first metaphorical itch I found impossible not to scratch, and it wasn't the last. It most likely doesn't need to be said, but sugar consumption is not great for people with autoimmune disorders. Too much sugar can disrupt your endocrine system and increase inflammation in vital and already stressed systems. You can imagine the spiral that a sugar addiction could create in teenage me. I wanted the bliss to however briefly escape the pain, but then the bliss caused deeper pain as more chronic ill health flares up. A classic addiction spiral. Music quote. Well, we don't need no one to tell us what to do. Or yes, we're on our own and there's nothing you can do. So we don't need no one like you to tell us what to do. Because I'm a brat and I know everything and I talk back because I'm not listening to anything you say. End quote. Prisoner of Society by The Living End, released in 1998, sung by Chris Chaney. 7. Break In. I was a very well-behaved boy. I did what I was told. I was good. I was more than compliant. Yes, I was cheeky with my words when I could get away with it. The scoundrel's outlet for my burgeoning intellect, however much they may or may not have been. But I conformed because I didn't want to stand out. I didn't want undue attention. The best way to avoid that was to keep quiet and behave. There was, however, a growing part of me that was burning up inside, fueled by these cultural allergies and the sugar coursing through my veins, stoking me to rebel and subvert. I wanted to scream and to cast off the rules and the structures and the rigidity of my culture, but mainly of my restricting health conditions. More and more things began to sit uneasy with me. The rigidity of the school week, the odd, unexplained rituals of religion and churches, the pressure to act a certain way from my parents, the social norms and expected manners drilled into me mainly by my dad, the formalities that I didn't connect with, like saying the Lord's Prayer or reciting the national anthem, or singing Christmas carols. None of these things made sense to me. At the time, they felt like empty, hollow platitudes. Oh, the heavy burdens of being a 12-year-old. The oppression of living in a first world country, safe from real tyranny, war, and government control. All of the hierarchical systems wanted to boss me around and control me. The TV got into my head, and the advertisers reduced my agency. They knowingly reduced my individual capacity. Yes, I jest. But to me, these systems did not seem like truthful. I mean, I was being sold Mars bars by Steve Monaghetti. Everywhere was cheating and lying and stealing and manipulating, and no one seemed to notice. Like a dam holding back a raging torrent, I couldn't contain the heavy energy of my battle with my body and my struggles with the external world and its rules and pressures. So, in my last year of primary school, 2 friends of mine and I broke into our school classroom one weekend and stole some stuff. Let's hear that again for dramatic effect. 2 friends of mine and I broke into our school classroom one weekend and stole some stuff. How could the well-behaved, quiet boy who always listened and never caused a fuss and wanted to fly under the radar with less than an ounce of cruelty inside him undertake such petty criminality? Surely I was led astray by the peer pressure to fit into my social circles with my 2 friends, and it was inside them, but not I, that grew the destructive seeds of antisocial behaviour. No, it was me. We did it together, but I had to decide to do my part, and I did. Was it the allure of the adrenaline pulse? The fear of being caught? Or the excitement of not? The desire to show on the outside what I was feeling on the inside? Just to feel something different? I sat watching the news that night with my family, petrified out of my itchy skin, that my picture would be shown, that the police were hunting the robbers of the Graceful State School break-in, that a task force had been created.
You find this man.
And that they would spare no expense to track down and punish the criminals responsible for prying open the metal louvers above the library, hopping in the window and taking $7.50 out of the lunch jar on our teacher's desk.
Search of every warehouse, farmhouse, hen house, outhouse, and doghouse in that area.
My parents and everyone I ever knew would discover what I had done, and the feelings on the inside, my confusion and rage and frustration and hurt, would be exposed to the outside world as the actions of a despicable boy who didn't know right from wrong and had shamed his community. Worlds would collide. No words would be able to explain them apart again. But there was no task force. There was no exposing. Worlds didn't collide. They remained wholly separate. The feeling of terror subsided as each night passed, and life went on. Not quite the same as before. I had discovered another powerful force, and much like the sugar I was gutsing every chance I got, this force was intoxicating, another itch that was impossible not to scratch. The power of secrecy and concealment. I'm going to end this episode with a literary quote that really struck me. In this moment, sitting at home, watching the news, I was like Emile Sinclair, the protagonist in Hermann Hesse's Damien, after he encounters his own malevolence for the first time. As he looked around his home, quote, all of it was lost to me now. I, deeply engulfed in an alien world, was entangled in adventures and sin, threatened by dangers, fear and shame, end quote. The sights and sounds of my home, just like his, were, quote, more moving and precious than ever before, but they had ceased to be a refuge and something I could rely on. None of this was mine anymore. My feet had become muddied. I could not even wipe them clean on the mat. Everywhere I went, I was followed by a darkness of which this world of home knew nothing. I felt that new offences were bound to grow out of this one offence, that I was living a lie concealed deep inside myself. End quote. Thanks for listening. Next episode, we wade into the muddy waters of high school.
Cher, you're a virgin?
I mean, I'm not prude. I'm just highly selective.